Earlier this year, Warner Brothers Pictures released a 30-second TV spot for the upcoming Superman movie directed by James Gunn. It ended with this shot of Superman flying, the kind of image we've seen countless times across comic books and film and TV for over 80 years. But for some reason, this time, it broke people's brains. Dorks across the internet lost their minds. On YouTube, there are countless videos analyzing this one single shot, with accusations of David Corenswet's face being AI generated.
He looks AI.
Or CGI.
It looks CGI.
Some say it's because it looks like AI or CG, and I think that just might be the case.
People analyzing the angles of the pupils in his eyes. Some even bigger losers attempted to quote-unquote fix the shot by using AI. And look, even if there had been AI on Superman's face, which there isn't, haven't you guys heard the age-old proverb, two AIs don't make a right? James Gunn himself eventually felt obligated to make a public statement that no, there is no CGI on his face. It is very simply the actor being shot on a green screen composited against drone footage shot in Norway. So we should maybe calm down with lobbing these crazy AI accusations at any random thing we see. Like, I hate AI basically as much as anybody can, but historically, it's never good when people start throwing out extreme accusations willy-nilly. I'm looking at you, Salem, Massachusetts. You were still in timeout, and you know why. Now look, this is art, and art is all subjective. Anyone can like or dislike anything. But personally, I think this shot looks great. There's a real sense of speed, the movement is graceful and confident. I love the close-up on Superman's face, clearly enjoying himself. But all the hubbub around this shot got me thinking about how silly the word hubbub is, but also that all these people are sitting here analyzing a shot of a man flying. Something that is physically impossible. Sorry to state the obvious here, but humans cannot fly. How is there a right or wrong way to visualize this cinematically when it doesn't exist in our reality? And yet, it's something that movies have been doing over and over again since the beginning of cinema. And beyond just movies, human flight has been a fascination in cultures all over the world for thousands of years. So where does this dream of flying come from? Why do we keep returning to it and using new artistic mediums to try to make it real? So in this episode, I think it's time to try to figure out why cinema is so obsessed with defying gravity. Let's just roll the title sequence. Hello, I'm Patrick Willems, and welcome back to another episode of the show. I'm sorry again for getting a little bit carried away back there. I got excited when I realized that for once we had a topic where I could actually talk about movies that are, somewhat current and topical, that people actually care about for a change. But anyway, I want to start off by giving a big thank you to the great folks at Alpa Knitwear for providing this cardigan. Every day that we get closer to summer, I get more and more scared of the coming day when it will be too warm for me to wear my beloved sponsored sweaters anymore. What will I do then? I simply don't know. And in other news, the Patrick H. Willems Star Wars Holiday Special, available exclusively on Nebula, is a Webby Award honoree, which basically is a runner-up to be an actual nominee, so it means I can't actually win. But you know what they say, it's an honor just to be not quite nominated. Once again, the little guy is being boxed out by the likes of Disney, Netflix, and the dreaded Tubi. But now, the reason we're here today, there's a new Superman movie coming soon. And every time a new version comes out, of course, I'm always curious about things like the new casting, the new costume, how much murdering Superman will do. But in particular, I always really want to know what the flying will look like. Because this is Superman. The original movie back in 1978 was literally sold on the promise of you'll believe a man can fly. It's like seeing dinosaurs, one of those impossible dreams that only cinema can make real. But here's the thing. Flying isn't just something that movies and comic books got into in the 20th century, like that weird moment in the 90s when every other hit song was about flying.
I just wanna fly. I wanna fly. I'm learning to fly. I want to fly. I believe I can fly.
No, this goes back much further, way back to the beginnings of human history, when ancient people looked at the beauty of the earth and thought, meh, what else you got? Flying occurs all throughout Greek mythology. The myth of Icarus and Daedalus with their man-made wings, Hermes with his winged sandals, Eros with his wings, and then Pegasus, who is obviously not a human, but Perseus rides on him, so he allows people to fly. Norse mythology has the Valkyrie. Starting in the 4th century, Christian illustrations became full of winged angels, which, if you ask me, was a really good punch-up on the biblically accurate version, which are like these freakish things with way too many wings. There are the stories featuring magic flying carpets, like myths about King Solomon, and then 1001 Nights. And around 400 BCE, Chinese philosophers invented the kite, the first actual flying device. Leonardo da Vinci made designs for a flying machine, which, as we all know, would go on to play a major role in the Bruce Willis film Hudson Hawk. And then, over subsequent centuries, various other designs for flying suits and machines would be designed and sometimes built, but never actually work. But around the turn of the 20th century, a real obsession with verticality and rising above the earth kicked in. There was the construction of the Eiffel Tower, at the time the tallest man-made structure in the world. At the same time, the Wright brothers were developing the airplane that they would finally make fly in 1903. And right around the same time, J.M. Barrie created Peter Pan. In a 1992 interview, Steven Spielberg said, "To me, anytime anything flies, whether it's Superman, Batman, or E.T., it's got to be a tip of the hat to Peter Pan. Peter Pan was the first time I ever saw anybody fly. Before I saw Superman, before I saw Batman, and of course before I saw any superheroes, my first memory of anybody flying is in Peter Pan." While the idea of humans defying gravity... Jesus, that startled me.
Sorry, couldn't help myself.
So while the idea of humans flying has existed for thousands of years, our conception of unassisted human flight, meaning no wings, really does begin with Peter Pan, the character created by J.M. Barrie in 1902, first in the book The Little White Bird, then the 1904 play Peter Pan, which Barrie then adapted into the 1911 novel Peter and Wendy. Every instance of people flying in literature or comic books or cinema can be traced back to this.
My, we can fly!
You can fly.
We can fly!
Patrick, it seems like with this video you found a way to do the planes essay, But sans planes. Are you sure this video isn't just a subconscious way of getting back at people for the trains episodes?
No, Nobbles, that's not what we're doing here, and don't try to get in my head. If I wanted a therapist, I would go hire one.
Good to know. My rates are very reasonable.
No thank you. So 20 years after the original Peter Pan play, it was adapted into a silent film. For the flying sequences here, this used basically the same methods that they did on stage, with wires attached to the actors, a technique still used in movies to this day. For when the characters are flying around the room, this actually is pretty impressive. It still looks pretty good. It's almost impossible to see the wires except for this one shot where you can briefly see it attached to Peter's back. Seriously, Director Herbert Benson, what are you doing? Clean it up. Haven't you ever heard of Adobe After Effects? Seriously, directors these days. At the time, they didn't have a good method of shooting the exterior flying scenes, so once Peter Pan and the kids fly out the window, we don't really see them. Other than this one shot of the London skyline where the people are basically little animated dots. This is a more primitive version of the technique used 24 years later in the next major work of flight cinema, the Superman serials. For the flying sequences here, Superman would become an animated character, like a literal cartoon, flying against a live-action background, and then he would switch back to a real actor when he landed on the ground. A couple years later, the TV series The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves, developed a regular formula for, at the time, pretty effective flying scenes. Reeves would run and jump off the hidden springboard to launch him up into the air, and the show would then cut to him in the air against a rear projected background. They initially used wires to suspend him, even though sometimes his legs would wobble and droop a bit. You really need like great core strength for this kind of thing. But after an incident when a wire broke and Reeves fell, they switched to a new method where he would lay on this long spatula-like platform that was molded to his torso with a counterweight at the other end. In these scenes, Superman would almost always just fly left or right, never straight at the camera. Like Batman climbing a building, back then DC heroes loved to do exciting action in profile. Now all these things I've just talked about were lower budget productions. They were on television. So the most significant flying movie of the 20th century that really revolutionized how this was done was, unsurprisingly, 1978's Superman the movie. But before we get into that particular film, I want to talk about the science, or really pseudoscience, of how flying works. So how do various fictional works explain how and why people are able to fly? What is the actual physical process of flight? How is man able to go whoosh and zoom and pachoo? Well, I looked at all of these, and the truth is, they all do them a little differently. Peter Pan's flying is of course purely magical. It's powered by a substance called fairy dust, combined with the individual focusing on their happy thought, or as we call it today, the Studio 54 method. Once we have these two elements, the person levitates and is free to zip around to their heart's content. There's no science or physics here, just pure who gives a fuck, don't think about it energy. But Superman has always been rooted in science fiction. He is an alien, and his powers come from Earth's yellow sun affecting his Kryptonian physiology.
I'm into hard sci-fi. Fantasy is bullshit.
For the first 5 years of the comic books, Superman couldn't actually fly. Earth's lower gravity allowed him to jump great distances, 1/8 of a mile to be exact. You know, the whole leap tall buildings in a single bound thing. But then, smartly, the writers decided, you know what, let's just have him fly. It's cooler. And throughout the character's over 80-year history, there have been different explanations for how exactly he's able to fly. In early continuity, Kryptonians had an additional internal organ that allowed them to fly. A weird idea that didn't last very long. John Byrne's 1980s reboot introduced the idea that it's a form of telekinesis. He can move himself through sheer force of will with his mind. Darkseid's advisor Desaad proposed that Superman is actually bending space and time so that he's pulling himself forward. Other comics suggested that it involves a bioelectric field surrounding his body. But look, this is all made-up nonsense science. It's impossible and doesn't exist in reality. Am I overthinking this?
Yes.
Rhetorical question, Nobbles, of course I am. But the reason I think it's worth talking about is that the reasoning behind how the flying exists affects the way it looks physically, thereby requiring an aesthetic choice on how to visualize it on screen. So what is the physical process like? How is Superman doing it? Well, the 1978 movie never gives a scientific explanation for his flight. We never see him learn how to fly. The movie jumps ahead several years to after he's mastered his powers. The first time we see him fly is in this one wide shot in which Christopher Reeve gracefully steps forward, flies across the room, and straight past the camera. There's no compositing, no green screen here. The special effects happen in camera, and even today, we can't see the wires. And the next time he flies, the whole takeoff is also done in camera in a wide shot. There's no big force or shockwave as he takes off. Here, flying seems as easy as walking for him. He simply rises up off the ground, seeming to use his arms to guide himself. And through the rest of the film, much of the flying happens with really an updated version of what was done in the 1950s TV series, with Reeve composited in front of a background, which, yes, looks dated today, but at the time was revolutionary. In an interview from 1978, Reeve said, "The flying happens in the eyes. The flying comes in the conviction that you know where you are, what the altitude is, what speed you're going, and you know what you're looking at." And I think that's why, even with the dated visual effects, so much of this movie still works. When you look at these shots, yeah, the background compositing is a little iffy, but you look at his face and that performance is selling it. Other than Superman sequels and The Rocketeer, which is flight involving a jetpack, so it's not quite the same, the next major development in cinematic human flight was in Steven Spielberg's Hook, with visual effects by Industrial Light and Magic. This being a Peter Pan movie, the flying is once again more magic-based. Once he's defying gravity, Peter Pan seemingly directs where his body moves with his mind. It often resembles swimming, with him thrusting his legs to pick up speed. Like he literally does a backstroke at one point. This is achieved with a lot of wire work, with Robin Williams or a stuntman physically on the set. There's a great environmental effect with dust spraying here as he flies near the ground. And I think this is one of the things that really helps sell this kind of effect, when there's interaction with the environment. Like, remember that whole sequence in Martin Scorsese's The Aviator, when Howard Hughes realizes that to shoot flying scenes, as in plane scenes, you need clouds in the sky behind the planes to sell the idea of movement and speed. They figured that out back in the late 1920s, and sure enough, every flying scene since has involved skies full of cumulus clouds. So as you can see in shots like this one, it's the clouds around him that really sell the effect. And now we jump ahead 12 years to this. While Neo only flies in the final shot of the original Matrix, in the sequels, he's flying all the time, referred to as doing his Superman thing. Now, I think the physical process here is really interesting, especially if you want to get nerdy about how Neo's abilities work, which I do. Each time he flies, he has a big takeoff, where he has to focus his energy and do a precise movement to launch himself. There are these ripples on the surfaces around him, so there's a shock wave, but not one that damages or cracks the ground. It's like a ripple in reality, like in the hallway at the end of the first movie. He's warping the world around him to basically undo gravity. Much of the flying is shot straight on, with Neo centered in the frame, flying right toward the camera as the background flies by. His coat functions like Superman's cape, rippling in the air, creating a sense of motion. But for the more movement-heavy shots, Neo is entirely CGI, and here the camera is able to be more active, flying with him. These techniques, especially the use of digital doubles, would become standard in the following years, used in films like Superman Returns in 2006. And as the superhero movie boom continued to explode, as you all know, we got a lot more flying. 2013's Man of Steel seems to adapt the comic book concept of Superman's flight creating this anti-gravity field around his body. In the scene where he flies for the first time, as he focuses his energy and prepares to take off, we see particles from the ground levitating around him. And later, when he levitates off the ground, dust spins around him. In this movie, he tends to fly with his arms out in front of him, directing his body, which makes sense because we all know how powerful Henry Cavill's arms can be. The flying, like most of the movie, is shot with long lenses in a handheld cinema verite style. So the close-ups on Cavill here are shaky with the camera kind of vibrating, as if a camera operator is sitting right in front of him, trying to keep the camera steady. In wider shots, it seems like the camera is trying and struggling to keep up with Superman because he's going so fast. One angle has the camera sort of mounted at his feet, moving cleanly with him until he flies off ahead. This is an interesting technique that hadn't really been done before, that's trying to ground the flight in the reality of what it would actually take for a human being to film this. Okay, now I want to mention Wonder Woman 1984. Yeah, the movie isn't very good, but it can be better when we get to the flying, because arguably the best scene in this film is the one of Wonder Woman discovering that she can fly. It's shot almost entirely with the live actor on a green screen with pretty much perfect compositing. And what it nails is the unsteadiness caused by the intense winds up there. Like, it feels like it's taking real physical effort to stay afloat. And so there's this big emotional rush when she finally masters it. Again, this is all made up and impossible, so I don't want to say this is the most realistic flight because that doesn't make any sense. But in this one scene, this is the most I believe that this is the proper technique for doing it. And of course, because there are simply so many superhero movies, there's a lot more flying in Eternals and Captain Marvel and Shazam. But right now, I want to jump ahead to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is James Gunn's most recent film before Superman, and also his first time with a flying character, in this case, Adam Warlock, who, in a frequently memed image, is shot with a similar approach to what's used in the Superman shot. Now, I want to talk briefly about how lenses on cameras work. A long lens compresses space. It makes things in the distance seem closer together. And a wide lens expands the space. It makes things in the distance seem farther away. So when the camera is moving forward or backward, a wider lens makes the movement more pronounced, so it seems faster. So if you watched our episode on Grand Prix last year, where I talked all about those shots where the camera is mounted to the front of the car and it feels like you're going 1,000,000 miles per hour, that is because of really wide-angle lenses. And that's what's being done on this Adam Warlock shot, but I do want to point out that not every shot of him flying in the movie is using an extreme wide-angle lens. When he's flying at a regular speed, it's shot on a more neutral lens, like a 35 or 50 millimeter, and the wide angle, which is probably a 16, 18, or 21 millimeter, which kind of warps the image and exaggerates the movement, is only used to show when he's flying at his fastest. And this is similar to one shot in the movie Black Adam. You know the one I'm talking about. It's this one. It became a whole meme online, specifically this still image, which was literally taken in a movie theater on someone's phone. And out of context, yes, it looks really goofy. The Rock's head is huge. It's like his infamous cheat day desserts literally went straight to his head. But out of context, anything looks ridiculous. This movie, I think, is mostly pretty bad, but this shot, which lasts barely over a second, I honestly think is pretty effective in context. The idea here is that he's speeding up to fly impossibly fast, like in the Adam Warlock shot. So the camera basically does a dolly zoom, as in it physically moves in while zooming out on the camera to a wider angle, which warps the image more. It's like he's going so fast that space is warping, which I think is a pretty cool way to show impossibly fast speed. But of course, the visual comprehension and media literacy skills of nerds on the internet are worse than ever these days. People have gotten so used to 15+ years of bland filmmaking in major studio movies that any remotely stylized visual choice makes them lose their minds. Now wait, where have I heard something like that before? Oh right, in the Speed Racer episode, available now. So anyway, we now finally return to James Gunn's Superman, which, at least as of the day that I'm shooting this, has barely any flying footage available, so we're forced to study the same few seconds over and over. We can see some of the techniques that we've already discussed here, like the wide-angle lenses and the environmental effects. A detail that I really think helps sell this shot is the wind blowing in Superman's hair. In most other flying scenes, it seems like there's like a mild fan blowing on people, but here, Superman's hair is waving like he's in a convertible with the top down. You don't immediately notice it, but it's that kind of small detail that helps make this feel real. Gunn has mentioned Top Gun Maverick as an influence on the flying, and I think you can see it here. That movie used lots of cameras mounted on the jets with wide-angle lenses inside the cockpit to sell the subjective experience of being there flying for yourself. And that's what's happening here. Wide lenses stabilized with Superman's body so the camera moves with him. Snyder's approach in Man of Steel, which was a totally valid one, was that of an observer watching Superman. This is about making the audience feel like they are Superman. There were, of course, other examples, but for the sake of efficiency, I had to skip over some. And yes, I know I am gonna hear all about it in the comments section.
Not if I can help it. I'm here to quell any conceivable comment queries the common couch potato could commandeer.
What?
It's my new segment, Nobbles' Comment Cutoff Corner. I bring up all the things you missed so viewers don't have to.
Huh. I mean, that would save me the headache of having to respond to a bunch of dumb comments. Like, as much as I hate giving you a platform for literally anything, yeah, you know what? Go for it. The floor is yours.
Okay, so he mentions Peter Pan as like foundational, but we're not going to talk about the 2003, 2015, and 2025 versions. SMDH lol.
Nope, those movies just use techniques we've already discussed.
Iron Man, literally one of the Avengers, needs a mention.
Well, he's got repulsors on his hands and feet, so he's technically more like a human-shaped aircraft, and thereby disqualified. And that goes for Inspector Gadget too, in case you thought I forgot.
Not even a single mention of Miyazaki? Delete your account, bro.
Let's just say, wait to post a comment until you watch the whole video.
There is more flying in movies and TV these days than ever before. Visual effects have evolved to a point where this is now relatively easy to achieve, so even like CW shows can do it pretty well. But now that it's so common, I feel like there's a lack of wonder and joy to it. Flight primarily exists in superhero movies, where it's almost always in service of action and violence. A couple years ago, James Cameron spoke about how when making the original Avatar, the studio tried to get him to cut down the extended flying sequences, saying, "The studio felt that the film should be shorter, and that there was too much flying around on the Banshees." Well, it turned out that's what the audience loved the most, in terms of our exit polling and data gathering. As he usually does, Cameron got his way, and as he usually does, he was proven to be right. Avatar went on to become the highest grossing movie of all time, and it seems like that was partly due to people just enjoying the escapism of flight. Not even flight into battle, just flying around and having a nice time. Some of the most emotional, thrilling scenes in all of cinema, for me at least, are moments when people realize that they can fly. I'm talking about like the bikes flying in E.T., or when the Iron Giant flies for the first time, or in Kiki's Delivery Service when her ability to fly returns. or more recently in The Matrix Resurrections when Trinity can fly. There's a cathartic rush here that's kind of hard to explain, but personally, as someone who very rarely cries at movies, most of these moments reduce me to tears. I don't know what this says about me, but it just hits me every time. It's this profoundly beautiful instance of personal transcendence. I mean, we just had another huge one in the giant blockbuster Wicked, where in the climax of the movie, I think Cynthia Erivo perfectly expresses this feeling. Okay, now I know this is going to deeply offend most of my fellow millennials, but I'm not a huge fan of the movie Hook.
Careful, Patrick. I already did my comment cutoff, and that's gonna start a wildfire in the comment section.
Yes, Nobbles, I'm aware. I know what I'm doing. So, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Hook, but in that scene, when Peter flies again, suddenly the movie feels like a masterpiece. Also, I'm on the record as not being crazy about Man of Steel, but that first flying scene is pretty great. By far the best part of the movie, and it's the one time that Superman actually seems to experience any joy in the whole film. Look, if we want to talk about flying being this big cathartic emotional rush, the final shot of The Matrix is literally Neo flying straight up past the camera. And when that happens, we all go nuts and suddenly the audience is on their feet, ripping seats out of the floor and moshing in the theater to rage against the machine. The image of people rising as they transcend and grow and become more powerful has existed through all of human storytelling, from the Greek gods on Mount Olympus to Rocky running up the museum steps as his theme song plays, which, lest we forget, is literally called Gonna Fly Now. Flight is the ultimate feeling of freedom taking a literal form. It's defying one of the core laws of physics. In the air, you're untouched by anything. You have total independence, and you are above everything. All problems seem small and beneath you. It is transcending regular existence. In Terry Gilliam's film Brazil, Sam Lowry is stuck in this bleak existence, dealing with crushing bureaucracy and a collapsing society, but every night, he dreams that he's flying. In 1982, renowned comic book writer slash amateur pagan Santa Claus, Alan Moore, wrote a reboot of a comic book called Miracle Man, which was originally a very obvious Shazam ripoff from the 1950s. Moore's update was about a middle-aged man named Michael Moran who keeps having dreams in which he's flying, until he finally discovers that as a child, he had been a superhero called Miracle Man, but forgot who he was and lost his ability to fly. As you may have noticed, this is a very similar premise to Steven Spielberg's Hook. For the first half of his career, Steven Spielberg, the most popular filmmaker of all time, was obsessed with flight, and by extension, Peter Pan. From the same interview quoted earlier, he said, "I am absolutely fascinated by flying. It is a big deal in my movies. All my movies have airplanes in them. You name the movie, they all fly. To me, flying is synonymous with freedom and unlimited imagination." So Close Encounters of the Third Kind ends with a man flying away in a spaceship that, the movie tells us, will prevent him from ever aging, completely abandoning his wife and children, who, in all honesty, should have been more impressed with his mashed potato sculpture. Spielberg made multiple movies about pilots. At the start of each Indiana Jones movie, a plane takes him to his next adventure. Empire of the Sun is all about a young boy who is obsessed with airplanes and flight. And then there's E.T., a movie where characters literally read the book Peter Pan aloud, and then in the climax, the heroes of the film are able to fly via, like in Peter Pan, their belief in something otherworldly. And notably, it is only the children who can fly, not the adults. whether or not these were inspired by Spielberg and E.T., there were several more 80s fantasy films involving children flying, such as The Neverending Story and the animated film The Snowman. But the one filmmaker even more obsessed with flight than Spielberg is Hayao Miyazaki. Flight occurs in almost every movie he's ever made, whether with people flying in fantastical gliders, or vehicles with flapping wings, or on giant forest spirits, or dragons, or brooms, and then of course in lots and lots of airplanes. And Miyazaki primarily makes movies for and about children. Almost everyone who flies in his movies is a child, with the notable exceptions of Porco Rosso and The Wind Rises, but those are tied to real-world flight via airplanes, not magical flight. In so many of these stories, there is this link between childhood and flight.
And why do you think that is?
Well, Sigmund Freud proposed that children's dreams of flying represent a repressed desire to become an adult, and thus become sexually active.
Yeah, that sounds like him.
But in her paper, Children in the Sky, Flying Dreams in the Fantasy Films of the 80s, Carolina Kostera argues against that. Flying obviously represents freedom, but more specifically, she says, the freedom of childhood, when you're not dragged down by the weight of the world and adult responsibility. So if we're to look at Peter Pan as the primary example, dreams of flying really represent not wanting to grow up.
Or for adults, it's a desire to feel like a kid again. So Patrick, let's talk about your childhood.
You know what? No, thank you. I'm good. I think it's time to get back to the regular essay. That's enough of this. Okay, so this whole dream of flying, is this just about a bunch of adults wishing they were kids again? I mean, kinda. Plenty of people have already written about how the modern obsession with superhero movies is tied to a cultural infantilization, a refusal to let go of childish things. But beyond that, it's a result of the natural desire to escape and transcend regular life. Like, The Matrix is not about wanting to be a child again, it's about wanting to break free from the box society puts you in as an adult. Which finally brings us back to Hook, which marked the culmination and conclusion of Spielberg's flight obsession. Now, this movie kind of makes me insane. It is such a weird mess, and honestly, I feel like I should just do a whole video on it because there's so much to say about it. It is fascinating, but I'm gonna put that aside for now. So earlier in the 80s, Spielberg had come close to making a Peter Pan adaptation, and now, in 1991, he finally made it, but not a traditional one. He made a legacy sequel about Peter Pan growing up, becoming an adult, and forgetting how to fly. This is a movie that reconciled the freedom of childhood with the responsibility of adulthood. And in the end, the adult Peter Pan finds a balance. He can still fly as an adult with adult responsibilities. He's no longer a child, but it's his love for his children that allows him to fly. And this, to bring it full circle, is basically what Superman is. He's an evolution of the Peter Pan idea. Also an ageless hero from a distant land who can fly, but instead of a child, he's an adult with shredded abs. He was originally created for children, but in this story, the one who can fly is a fatherly figure. There's the freedom of flight combined with the responsibility of being an adult. Which finally brings us all the way back to that Superman shot. We have become kind of desensitized to human flight in movies, since it's now just such a part of action scenes in blockbusters. But this shot is not that, and that's one of the things that I like about it. This isn't in the middle of battle. Superman is not flying at someone to punch them. He's enjoying himself, experiencing the freedom and joy of flight. Why does he do that barrel roll that seems to make some people so mad? Because it's fun. It's about the vibes. In this episode, we have discussed so many different approaches to filming flight. But for me, the ones that stand out the most are the ones that really capture that feeling of escape and freedom. As much as the rest of Hook kind of drives me nuts, that scene where he flies does it better than maybe any movie before or since. It's this feeling that humanity has been chasing for thousands of years, and cinema became the best medium to capture it. Like, if you sit close enough to a big enough screen, it kind of feels like a flight simulator. It's like you're really living out that dream of defying gravity. But if we're going to talk about the link between flying and dreams, we also have to acknowledge the obvious link between dreams and movies. Because, as Michelle Williams says at the very beginning of Spielberg's autobiographical film, The Fabelmans,
movies are dreams.
So movies by nature are an immersive reality that looks real, something that we can lose ourselves in. So what I'm saying is, if flying is one of humanity's oldest dreams, and movies are dreams, then maybe the ultimate goal of cinema is to capture the dream of flight, and by extension, a return to the primordial child inside all of us, that blissful chapter of life where everything was possibility and wonder, and we weren't yet burdened with the weight of adulthood and its endless pursuit of good sponsor rates and eye-grabbing thumbnail images, and...
I'm so sorry, Patrick, but our time is up today. For next time, I would like to circle back to that thing you said earlier. You can only cry when characters learn to fly?
That's not what I meant. I can cry at all kinds of things.
Bristles when confronted with emotions.
Nobbles, get the hell out of here. I have to go to the ad read.
Okay, but I have to charge for the whole hour.
This sucks. This is the worst therapy ever. Okay, so coming up next time, we've got an episode that I am really excited about one of my favorite subgenres of movies. It's what I call documents movies. You know, movies like Spotlight, Zodiac, All the President's Men, Aaron Brockovich. Movies about investigations where people do research in boxes of old documents. It's like my favorite thing. This also means 90s John Grisham movies like The Firm and The Pelican Brief, plus just most David Fincher movies. These movies rock, and if I may say so myself, the episode also rocks, and I can say that confidently because it's already done. It'll be out on YouTube in 3 weeks, but it's already out right now on Nebula, so you can just go watch it there now. Nebula, as you're probably aware, is the indie streaming platform that I helped develop, where I'm pretty sure a lot of your favorite creators already are. You can watch all of our videos there with no ads, and mine all premiere there weeks before they're on YouTube. And as you may have heard, Nebula has really been expanding our scripted fiction branch. My new short film, The Dinner Plan, starring Griffin Newman, John Hodgman, and Zach Cherry, premieres there later this year. We're about to start shooting our new anthology series, Subliminal, and I'm directing an episode written by Matt Kelly from Nando V Movies. Plus, I have a ton of bonus videos, my feature-length film Night of the Coconut, and the Patrick H. Willems Star Wars Holiday Special, a Webby Award honoree, all available exclusively on Nebula. If you use my code, or click the link in the description, or this QR code here, you will get 40% off of an annual plan. That means a whole year for only $3 per month. These subscriptions are what fund all the projects we're making. Nebula doesn't take VC money. And if you use my link, a portion of that goes directly to supporting me. Anyway, I've been talking for way too long here. The point of all of this is that the next episode, it's already out on Nebula, so go watch it right now. That's all. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.